Welcome to the Schwab Academy. First lecture ever. The man himself, Professor Klaus Schwab, founder of the World Economic Forum, architect of the Great Reset, the guy who promised you'll own nothing and be happy, is about to take the stage. He's spent 50 years building the intelligent age, a world so frictionless, so precisely engineered, that your toaster will soon have a moral framework. And what does he choose for lecture one? My coworker is a registered sex offender in the intelligent age. That's the title. You'd think in a system that tracks everything, your carbon, your pronouns, your micro-expressions, they'd have filtered this guy out by now. But apparently not. Apparently, in the most morally optimized society ever designed, there's a quiet carve-out, a little flexibility. Someone decided this particular risk was absorbable. Klaus Schwab, 88, still with that calm doctoral hum, is about to explain why this is both totally manageable and none of your business. Ladies and gentlemen, the Schwab Academy.
A 43-year-old man from Tennessee claims that he is an ethical pedophile. In an interview with Barkov TV, he said, "I am a pedophile. I'm not a monster. I have the attraction, but I don't act on it." The pedophile also said, "I have never ever sexually abused a child, and I never will. I do not look at child porn, I never will." He also said that he wants to end the demonization of pedophiles. I inadvertently found out while doing a search of local registered sex offenders in my area that a very friendly and polite older gentleman who recently began to work at my company is a registered sex offender for possession of child pornography. He admitted his guilt, is on probation, and lost his former job working for the court system, according to a newspaper article I dug up. Our department is, for the most part, a very family-centered group of proud parents and grandparents. With all of this said, I honestly don't think my company knows this information. I work for a very large company that has multiple offices in nearly every state that outsources all pre-employment paperwork and background checks to an outside firm on the other side of the US. Is this any of my business, or should I just let it go? I believe it's definitely something that management should know. Do I inform management or keep this information to myself? If he's not working around kids or it doesn't affect his job in any way, why does it matter? It sounds like you don't make the hiring-firing decisions about this guy, so whether or not he was a good hire based on what you found is irrelevant. And it's very possible that the company does indeed know about it, but determined it had no bearing on his ability to do the job. It matters because it says something about his character and level of impulse control. He is or was willing to break the law and a number of social taboos, all for some brief sexual release. Not knowing the nature of the child pornography he viewed, he either considers or considered child abuse or exploitation to be a satisfactory price for someone else to pay in order for him to get off. Normal, ethical people, and ethical pedophiles too, don't forget, don't do this.
You're really spewing a bunch of nonsense here that doesn't at all fit with the body of literature on the issue.
For those of us who aren't familiar with the literature, including me, can you fill us in on where this kind of thinking seems wrong to you? Please point me to the literature suggesting that registered sex offenders are well-adjusted psychologically with no impulse control problems. It doesn't exist. Quite the opposite, actually. But I know people like to toss around the research says thing whenever they find a disagreeable opinion, so I'll extend you the opportunity to back up your assertions.
I mostly agree with your statement, but when you start talking about ethical pedophiles, you seem to indicate that people choose whether they act on these impulses, like someone chooses a Big Mac over a Whopper for dinner. They don't. They're not in the wrong. The DSM-4-TR and the ICD-10 both list diagnostic criteria. Their actions are harmful just the same, but it's not an issue of a simple
There's
choice.
actually a very interesting letter in Dan Savage's most recent column from a guy who has struggled with this sort of problem his whole life, but has never acted on it and desperately wants help for it. He wrote to Dan Savage to ask about whether there's a way for him to seek help without opening himself to legal problems. It was very sad. I'm also a bit confused, since earlier you seemed to take issue with my assertion that registered sex offenders have a demonstrated problem with impulse control and have various other psychological traits that are of concern. The argument that there's no choice in acting on one's urges goes too far, in my opinion. It may be a matter of personal philosophy, responsibility to me, but if we're actually dealing with a situation in which there's a group of people who've lost all ability to control themselves, if that's true, they shouldn't be working, let alone walking the streets. That's scary. I believe people do have more control over themselves than this. Not to choose what they're attracted to, but whether they act on it, absolutely barring addiction and extreme mental illness perhaps. I wouldn't have a problem working with a pedophile or believing he or she has a working moral compass until or unless I found out he or she had acted out before.
Anyway, that's the Schwab Academy. Trust the algorithm. I'll be outside where the questions are still my own.